Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The ARC of California is thrilled to announce Caring Futures, a groundbreaking program dedicated to supporting caregivers and family members of adults with disabilities. Understanding the unique challenges faced by family caregivers as they age, Caring Futures offers critical assistance, resources, and a supportive community. Today's Caring Conversation is just one part of Caring Futures program here at the ARC of California. As you see, we have ASL interpretation for our discussion today. You can turn on closed captioning by clicking the button in the bar below. You are also invited to stay 10 to 15 minutes longer at the end for a question and answer session with our invited guest. At that time, we'll invite you to raise your hand and ask your question directly. You can also put your questions in the chat. Hello, everyone. My name is Felisa Strickland. I am a proud sole parent caregiver for my daughter, Lily. Lily is 23 years old. She has a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, autism, epilepsy, and IDD, and requires full-time care. We enjoy our life and live in Santa Barbara, California. Alongside full-time caregiving, I am a strong advocate for individuals with disabilities. I serve as a board member for the ARC of California, as well as the Alpha Resource Center of Santa Barbara. I also participate on many committees and enjoy getting involved in fundraisers and advocacy projects in our community. As a Caring Futures instructor and parent educator, I am thrilled to be here for this important conversation with you and our special guest. Today's topic is public benefits for family caregivers, how to maximize income from Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, and work incentives. I am so excited to introduce our guest. Our presenter today, Julian Elliott, started with the Department of Rehabilitation in 2015 as a work incentives planner, providing individualized benefits planning services for Social Security beneficiaries participating in DOR's vocational rehabilitation program to assist them in gaining a better understanding of their benefit situation. Learn about the great work incentives and resources available to help when they gain employment, and ensure that they have the information needed to make an informed choice in going to work. Julian now serves as a Social Security specialist, providing technical assistance, training, and support for the DOR's work incentives planning program across California. Julian holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Management from La Sierra University, a work incentives practitioner credential from Cornell University. Without further ado, please welcome Julian as today's speaker. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Felisa. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. We're so excited. We've got a lot of people interested in this topic, so I know you're going to give us a lot of great information today, and I look forward to our conversation. Let's just jump right into it. So today, we want the audience to get to know you a little bit better. So Julian, tell us a little bit about what drew you into your career with the Department of Rehabilitation and working with public benefits and what you're currently doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. So a big part of my college years, my university focused on what we call service learning. So ways that we can apply what we learned through school in serving our community. And that took the shape of, many different programs. So working with different advocacy groups, working with a lot of our different schools, and working with underserved populations within our community to see how we can kind of provide these different services to make sure everyone is having an equitable experience. And that's what really kind of brought me to my career with the Department of Rehabilitation, where early in my career I kind of had to make the decision of what sort of impact I wanted to make in my work. And I think connecting with the Department of Rehabilitation gave me that opportunity.
Well, it's a wonderful resource for our families, and having someone like you here today to help us, figure out the best ways to navigate that, I think is so important. So family caregivers of adults with developmental disabilities often have questions about Social Security and Social Security disability insurance programs. In fact, I suspect we're going to get quite a few today after our conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about how people with a developmental disability can maximize their Social Security and Social Security disability income in California?
Absolutely. I think disability benefits in general are extremely confusing. I think there's so much information out there and misinformation that it's kind of really hard to decide, if I do go to work, what's going to happen to my benefits? If I do decide to, you know, take a certain role, how is that going to impact not only my cash benefits, but my health benefits? And if something were to happen to that job, what could I do to, get my benefits back? Because you hear a lot of these horror stories of, hey, I went to work for, you know, went to work part-time and Social Security took all my benefits away and I'm not able to get back onto them. Or I went to work for, full-time and, it was good for a while, but when I lost my job, I couldn't get my benefits back and I was left without any resources. So what I want to do here today is really kind of help everyone understand kind of what the resources are out there and kind of clear some of those myths and misconceptions that a lot of beneficiaries have about the disability benefits programs. I
Oh, that
think
would be wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
I think the first place to really start with that is really getting a clear understanding of what type of benefit is being received by the beneficiary. Because a lot of times, working as a work incentive planner, I worked with hundreds of disability beneficiaries. And the number one response I get when I ask, what type of benefit are you receiving, is usually, I receive a Social Security benefit, which is completely understandable. A lot of the documents that they receive will say you receive Social Security in, X amount of dollars. But what really needs to be considered is there are a lot of different disability benefits that can be received even through Social Security.
Mhm.
So I always like to start by saying, for one, there is Supplemental Security Income, or that SSI benefit. This, I feel, the vast majority of the individuals I work with receive. And really, the SSI program can be looked as a public assistance program. So to be eligible for something like SSI, you need to have, of course, a qualifying disability, and you need to have limited income and resources. So meaning you need the assistance and you have a qualifying disability, and there is no sort of work or credits required to qualify for that benefit. As long as there's a need, you can qualify for an SSI benefit. Now, on the other side of that, there's also what is called Title II benefits, which kind of houses a number of different disability benefits within that. So there's Social Security Disability Insurance, Childhood Disability Benefits, or CDB, and Disabled Widow or Widower's Benefits, or DWB. And these are all kind of under the umbrella of disability insurance benefits provided by Social Security. These benefits, as the name implies, are insurance programs. So someone, whether it be a spouse, a parent, or the beneficiary themselves, had to have had some work in the past, contributed into Social Security, and became eligible for that benefit. Now, working with younger populations, I've found many instances where the assumption is, hey, they haven't worked in the past, they're going to be receiving SSI benefits. But once we got to the, verifying the benefits, we found that, hey, they received actually an SSI benefit and a childhood disability benefit based on one of the parents receiving a disability or retirement benefit as well. So it's really important to kind of figure out what benefit or benefits are being received so you're able to make that informed choice in, making any decisions about going to work or, what you need to do moving forward.
So when someone, I just have a quick question there. So when someone is trying to determine what type of benefits they have, would they contact you or would they contact Social Security? I mean, where do they go to figure that piece out?
Really great follow-up question. So say how important it is to verify the benefit. How do you do it? Well, there's a couple ways that you're able to. Looking back at some award letters, Social Security will send those out periodically. That can glean some information about the type of benefit. If you don't have something like that, you can also create a My Social Security account. So Social Security has been transitioning heavily into providing online services. So with a My Social Security account, you're able to on demand print out award letters. So you're able to access up-to-date information about that disability benefit, whether it be an SSI benefit or SSDI benefit. And you can create those accounts by going to socialsecurity.com or excuse me, www.socialsecurity.gov/my account.
That is a great resource. We just started using that in my home with my daughter. And I'm really glad to see that for a lot of our families that I'm sure are listening today, many of us are rep payees for our children or our loved ones that we're caring for. So now they actually have, because it used to be that when I've tried to do that before, you couldn't actually register a Social Security account if you weren't the person, but now you can actually do that. There's an actual place there for account payee or representative payees so that you can set that up. So that's very, very helpful to know. Thank you. That's a wonderful, wonderful answer to that follow-up question. So let's go ahead and move to the next question we have. So we all know rates of employment for people with developmental disabilities has been low historically. As California continues outreach and work incentives to people with disabilities to improve employment rates, what should family caregivers know about work incentives and in integrating them with existing Social Security income and Social Security disability insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of reason I brought up verifying the type of benefits received is because each of those benefits, or excuse me, the Title II benefits and the SSI benefits have different work incentives associated to them. So how employment or work might impact the SSI benefit is going to be different than how it would impact a Title II benefit, whether that be an SSDI benefit, a childhood disability benefit, or that CDB, or a disabled widower's benefit. So it's really important to, one, identify the type of benefit or benefits being received, because you can receive multiple, and then determining, how you can integrate some of those work incentives into that. So I'll start with the SSI program, because I think this is probably the most prevalent. With SSI, it is a needs-based program. So to remain eligible for SSI, you have to, one, of course, have a qualifying disability benefit. Two, have limited income. And three, have limited resources. So for anyone on SSI, they have to have resources under $2,000 for an individual or $3,000 for a couple. So very restrictive in terms of, if you're on SSI, very hard to save anything past $2,000 because it will affect, if you have $2,001 in your bank account, it's going to make you ineligible for that full month's of SSI benefits if that transitions to the next month. So really important to keep that in mind. And there are ways to kind of work around that as well, which I'll be sharing as we kind of discuss those work incentives in a little bit more detail. When it comes to SSI's income requirements, the great thing is Social Security actually wants beneficiaries to go back to work. They understand that SSI, I think for 2024, the maximum amount you can receive in SSI is probably around $1,100 or so, give or take a little bit. So it can be very hard, especially if you're trying to pay rent, pay for food, pay for, just being out in the community. It can be very hard to live off that. So Social Security understands, hey, we want you to go to work. So what they've done is they put into place a number of work incentives to make sure that, hey, if you go to work, you're always going to be better off financially because they count less than half of what you earned in adjusting that SSI check. So although the SSI check may seem lower, your total financial outcome is always going to be larger. And there are additional work incentives within that you can sort of reduce the amount Social Security will count. And it just really depends on the individual about what work incentives would best apply to them. But for everyone on SSI, they will count less than half of what you earn. So if you earned, let's say, for example, $1,085 in a month, Social Security will do some general deductions for, they'll do some general deductions for a general income exclusion of $20, an earned income exclusion of $65, and then they'll divide that amount by half. So if you earned $1,085 from employment, Social Security is going to only count $500 of that, and that's what's going to reduce that SSI check. And that's really excluding all other work incentives that we haven't really discussed yet, but we'll be getting into.
Well, that's just helpful knowing that. I don't think a lot of us, I didn't realize that. So understanding how that process works will really help people make a decision on whether working is the best thing for them, or for their situation. I mean, obviously a lot of people want to work, but I think that in our community, or a lot of people are just not clear on whether they can or can't, and don't know whether it will actually be, detrimental to lose their benefits. Obviously if they have benefits, it's because they need them, but understanding that process a little bit better will help people figure that out. So thank you so much for sharing that. What are some of the other incentives that you were going to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of within that, so on the basic level, they have that calculation, but kind of going a little bit more into that, if there are any what they call impairment related work expenses, so things that the individual has to pay for that they need for work, and it relates to their disability, then any amount that they have to pay for that, they can actually have deducted from their countable income. So, for example, well, typically half of it they'll be able to deduct from their countable income. So, for example, if you had someone that had to pay for an interpreter for a meeting, let's just for the sake of an example, um, if they had to pay, $50 for that, $25 of that they'll get back in their SSI payment. Um, so that's one great work incentive. So, really depending on an individual, if they have those expenses related to their disability that they need to work. Um, Another great work incentive is what is called the Plan to Achieve Self-Support, or PASS plan. This is if you have someone that, maybe they're working now, but they have a future employment goal in mind, and they want to find a way to kind of save for those different expenditures. With a PASS plan, any money that that individual contributes into a PASS is fully not counted as countable income when SSI or when Social Security is doing that SSI calculation again. So if as part of that PASS plan, you submit an application, you say, hey, I want to go back to school. I need help paying for my textbooks. I need help paying for gas to and from school. I need help paying for a computer. You start putting money towards that PASS plan. And basically, as you put it towards that PASS plan, your SSI cash benefit will increase um, equal to the amount that you're contributing to that PASS plan. So just a way to kind of, one, continue to pay for your basic needs using your SSI and your remaining work income, and then also saving for that future goal.
Well, those are some great things, especially people that are getting, supported employment is just something that's, a lot of people are looking into now. And so that's another way to help with that. And another way to accommodate, and the modifications don't count against you, right? They actually work for you. So that's great.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So what is the most important thing you want us to remember about Social Security and work incentives that you shared with us today?
So there's just so much information I wish I could share. I know we were on a very limited time schedule, but I would say, with just kind of as a broad overview, with the cash benefits, kind of like we talked about with the SSI program, there are tons of work incentives to make sure you can try out work with either it not impacting your cash benefit at all, or you'll get a reduction, but you'll be able to continue to receive some of those benefits. And you'll always be better off financially during those times. Um, I think a huge concern that beneficiaries have as well is, hey, I'm fine with losing my cash benefit. I want to go to work. I want to be able to be in my community, do all these things and make income. But, I have a lot of medical expenses, or, I'm fine with losing my cash benefits, but if I lose my Medi-Cal, I don't have any other health insurance I can use, or I can't afford other health insurance. Or if I have Medicare, same situation. I can't lose that because there are different services I need, and I need that healthcare coverage. But the great thing is there are specific work incentives to make sure, hey, even if you go to work and you earn too much to receive a cash benefit, you can still receive those healthcare benefits. And there's tons of different Medi-Cal and Medicare programs to make sure those can continue. One I always like to mention specifically for SSI consumers is that there's a special provision called 1619B. So, again, Social Security every month will do that calculation based on your work income. And if you earn too much income from employment to receive an SSI cash benefit, it doesn't mean you're going to be terminated from the SSI. What it means is, hey, you earn too much from your employment. We did the calculation, your SSI went to zero. So what we're going to do is we're going to put your SSI on pause, so you're not going to receive that cash benefit, but you'll continue to receive that SSI linked Medi-Cal benefit, which I think
Oh,
is, yeah, which I think is a really important consideration for anyone trying to go to work. And
that's really helpful to know.
but the important thing or a reminder of that, I think, apologies, I don't have the number in front of me, but I mean, it's a pretty hefty number, I believe around, I just don't want to throw out a random number, but let me see. I can pull it up really fast.
We've given us so much helpful information, and I know we're going to get a lot of great questions that are going to take us even further into the conversation. But yeah, I know that a lot of people are probably excited to hear that working is an option and we don't have to be afraid that we're going to lose our benefits. I have one quick question. So are you where people go to figure out this, what are the best incentives for them? I mean, is the Department of Rehabilitation the place that family would go or a person would go to figure out which incentives would work best for them, or is that the Social Security office, or where would they go for that?
So to finish off my last question, so the amount that someone can earn under 1619B is about $58,638 a year. So I mean, a pretty
Oh,
substantial number to be able to keep your free SSI linked Medi-Cal. So what I mean by free is there's no premiums associated with that Medi-Cal program. So a really great way to, continue with that, receive your Medi-Cal, and if anything were to happen to that employment, so say the hours were reduced or it ended, Social Security will say, hey, you report your wages to them. They'll just restart your SSI without having to go through any sort of reapplication process. Because again, it was never terminated. So your Medi-Cal continues and your SSI will come back without any sort of delay.
oh, that's great to know. Great. So, are you the place where people would go?
So we are one of the options. So with the Department of Rehabilitation, we have about 30 work incentive planners statewide that um, provide benefits planning services. So if you have, we talked about tons of information today. And
Yes.
if you have specific questions about how does that apply to me, these work incentive planners are there to kind of help answer those questions.
Oh,
Now,
that's good to know.
we're not the only resource in the community. So Social Security also funds what we call work incentive planning and assistance agencies, or WIPAs. These provide benefits planning as well. So depending on your situation, with the Department of Rehabilitation, if you're ready to seek employment and are looking for some additional services, whether it's going back to school, getting training, getting assistive technology, we can help with that in addition to providing that benefits planning. Work incentive planning and assistance agencies will just provide the benefits planning part of that. So depending on your situation, you're able to go to both. And a great way to kind of access what resources are in your community is by going to Social Security's Choose Work website. So that's choosework.ssa.gov. They have a
Wonderful.
great find help tool, and you're able to put in your zip code and it'll tell you what VR service is in your area and also what WIPA program is also in your area.
Oh, thank you, Julian. That's so helpful. And those things are also in the chat for anyone that's interested in those websites. You can check the chat and I'm sure they're in there. Thank you so much for that wonderful conversation. A lot of good information in there, and we'll be doing questions in just a moment. So the future is now. Designing a support plan for you and your adult family member, a 6-week live online class series where caregivers develop a comprehensive future planning guide for the caregiver and their adult family member in a small and welcoming environment. Futures Now classes are Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, also offered in Spanish. Self-Care Matters, Wellbeing for the Caregiver is a 2-week live online class series where caregivers learn about and practice tips, resources, and strategies to improve and sustain their well-being. Self-Care Matters classes are on Mondays and also offered in Spanish. Visit the Caring Futures website and join our mailing list to keep up to date on these offerings to register for classes and more. Also, if you want to continue this conversation, then I invite you to join our Caring Futures Facebook group. It's a private group only for family caregivers and is a safe place for us to share our triumphs and challenges. A link to the Facebook group will be posted in the chat right now. So we're going to move on to our question and answer section. Our conversations come to an end. If you need to go, then please do. But if you'd like to stay and ask our guests some questions, then we invite you to do so. We're going to just ask you to type your questions in the chat, and there should be an option in the below on your computer, or if you're on a phone or tablet, then you should be able to click the dots on the bottom for the more option, and then choose raise hand or find the Q&A and type your question in. Raise your, or find the chat feature, I'm sorry. And then we will go through the questions and start to begin. I'm thinking, let's go in there now. I bet we have some questions already.
Yeah, so I do see a good amount of questions in the Q&A
Yeah.
feature. I guess I'll go ahead and get started there.
Okay, great.
We have a question from Jared. He's mentioning that he's losing his benefits at the end of the month and has signed up with the Department of Rehabilitation, but is still confused about what direction to go at this point. Well, really in this situation, it really just depends on your situation and what is going on with your benefit. At this point, I highly recommend appealing the decision because, again, I think in my experience working with the appeals process, a lot of times when Social Security is making a decision based on the disability, a lot of times it's just because not enough information was provided initially. So going through that appeal gives you an opportunity to work with your physician or any other individuals in your support group to get the correct information there. And you can work with agencies like Disability Rights California or reach out to your independent living centers to find additional resources.
Great. All right.
Who can help us get started in terms of applying for SSI and Medi-Cal? Great question. I think a lot of the independent living centers as well do have sort of that advocacy group where they can help apply for those benefits. So reaching out to the independent living center or ILCs would be your best option.
And also family resource centers usually have someone that can help you with that as well.
Completely agree. And Gent Daniels asked, I'm in need of help from an expert for my disability case. Specifically, my case made it to the final round of appeals. The judge made an error in their opinion where the wrong disability was cited, and unsure what to do next. I think a great resource for you to contact that can at least either provide assistance or point you in the right direction is going to be Disability Rights California. They're a great advocacy group, and if based on the details of your case, you've gone through the appeals process, they may be able to assist if there was an error made. You see, how does Social Security determine how much they will deduct from earnings if the beneficiary who is working is supported by a job coach? Really great question. So this is where I find a lot of misinformation in relation to job coaching and how that can impact the benefit. With the SSI program, job coaching actually does not play a factor in deciding how much Social Security is going to adjust that SSI check. Now, if the beneficiary is paying for that job coach in any way, then possibly that could be considered an impairment-related work expense. But the effect that a job coach might have is really reserved for that Title II side of the benefits, where if they have a childhood disability benefit or an SSDI benefit, that's where Social Security will look at that job coaching and say, how does that assist? In what aspects of this individual's role does that assist them in their work? And then they will reduce the amount of countable income that that individual will have. But that is only for the SSDI side or childhood disability benefit side. how do you claim disability-related work expenses? Report monthly to Social Security admin with monthly wage reports? So yeah, really great question. So if you do have those impairment-related work expenses that you'd like to claim, I would highly recommend reporting them when you report your wages to Social Security each month. That's one thing I wasn't able to get to in our conversation is if I was going to have you guys take away one thing, I think making sure to report your wages to Social Security and documenting all that you've reported is of utmost importance. Because, again, as you're reporting, you'll want to make sure that you have your own copies of anything that was reported and you're keeping track of that over time. But again, for those impairment-related work expenses, go ahead and apply or send that information over when you're sending in your copies of your pay stubs.
Julian, it looks like we have a couple people have raised their hands. Let's see if we can.
Okay.
Let's see if Nicole, did you want to unmute, or can we?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So actually, my name is Deborah, and I was unable to rename me. I couldn't find it on the on Zoom this morning. So yes, so I'm Deborah, and
Nice to meet you, Deborah.
so my daughter would love to start her own business, and I'm not quite sure how having your own business would impact her SSI, and so could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I always like to mention is the Department of Rehabilitation. We do help with employment as well as self-employment. So we are an option to kind of assist with that if that is your daughter's goal. When it comes to self-employment, it does get a little bit complicated because Social Security will look at what is called the net earnings from self-employment. So what you receive from that business isn't all counted into Social Security determining, how they're going to adjust that SSI check. So it's really important to keep track of any sort of expenses your daughter might incur from that business, and then working with a benefits planner to kind of determine what that kind of income is going to be. My recommendation is if you do have a small business, go ahead and, you can learn about the net earnings from self-employment. And then when you're reporting the Social Security every month, you can kind of estimate what those earnings might be for each month. And it's really at the end of the year when your daughter might have to file her taxes, where Social Security will make any adjustments based on that estimate. But having that estimate will really help make sure that there isn't a hefty overpayment at the end of the year.
Right. And so she could still keep her medical benefits as long as she doesn't make as much. What was the cap that you had mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So something to look into is going to be that 1619B provision.
Yeah.
There's another website I always highly recommend. It's db101.org. Great way to kind of learn about a lot of these different work incentives. But yeah, your daughter would, if she's on SSI, would absolutely have access to that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that question. I was curious about that too. Okay, so let's see. Where were we?
Let me see. So could something like Uber for transportation be considered a valid work-related cost? My daughter would not be safe on public transportation. Great question. It absolutely could be, but it really depends on how it would relate to your daughter's disability. And that's something where, you can kind of work with a benefits planner to kind of find ways to say, hey, how can I explain this expense so it applies to Social Security's rules on what can be an impairment-related work expense. But short answer, Ubers can absolutely do that depending on the work hours and why it's needed. Let me see, we have how long will Medi-Cal be available once monthly income exceeds allowance? So with that, with Medi-Cal, the great thing is there's tons of Medi-Cal programs to make sure that if you have a disability and you go to work, we want to make sure you're able to keep that Medi-Cal benefit. So even outside of that 1619B provision I had mentioned, there's even other programs specifically for individuals with disabilities at work. Another one to kind of look into is the Medi-Cal Working Disabled program. As part of that, if you don't have any unearned income, I believe you can earn up to about, let me see, I'm trying to remember my older numbers from last year. I know everything has kind of just changed recently, but I think it's over about $69,000 a year, and you can still keep that premium-free Medi-Cal under the Working Disabled program. So really, when you're on SSI and you're working, Medi-Cal isn't really the issue. It's you're going to be able to keep it and continue to work. And if something happens to that employment, that's not going to impact your Medi-Cal eligibility as well.
That's great to know. What about, here's a question, will you lose Medi-Cal and IHSS if you exceed allowable income from a job? What is the allowable maximum? Do you have anything on that?
Really great question. So with Medi-Cal and in-home support services, I know IHSS is only provided through Medi-Cal. So if you have things like Medicare, you're not going to get IHSS. So you're really important to keep that Medi-Cal benefit. Again, with that, there's all these great programs to make sure you can stay eligible for those Medi-Cal benefits, whether it's through that 1619B provision if you're on SSI, or utilizing that Medi-Cal Working Disabled program. But even past that, if you have really high costs, medical costs, so that includes what you pay for or what is covered through your IHSS, the Department of Social Services can actually, either Social Security or the Department of Social Services, depending on how you get your Medi-Cal, can actually make a individualized income limit for you if you have high medical costs, such as utilizing those in-home support services. So it's really individualized how much you can earn before there's any sort of impact. But I would say that threshold is extremely high for most individuals.
Okay.
So we see here, is able account a resource? So really, really great question. So something I wasn't able to mention. So CalAble, or that Achieving a Better Life experience, relatively new program provided by the state of California, where with ABLE accounts, or those, any money put into an ABLE account is excluded as a resource for many public assistance programs, including the Supplemental Security Income program. So if you're on SSI and you're having trouble keeping your income under $2,000, very important that if you're eligible for an ABLE account, to go ahead and use that as a vehicle to save your income. And again, with the ABLE accounts, it's very broad in terms of how that income needs to be used. So if it betters your life or the life of the beneficiary, you can go ahead and use that income for that. So paying for bills, paying for rents, paying for anything, you can use an ABLE account for that.
That's
and
such
it's
a
excluded
great,
as a resource.
yeah. Okay, how does a person with disability obtain help to get Social Security? Did you answer that one already?
Yeah, we talked about, well, I had mentioned the independent living centers, and there's a couple other community resources to reach out to, but I think starting with the ILCs, at least in my experience, has been a good starting point to connecting what's there in your local community.
Okay. If a parent makes too much to receive SSI benefits for disabled children, but their living expenses are high and leave family with little money left over, can they potentially receive benefits?
Unfortunately, with the SSI program, especially for children under, for children under the age of 18, it can be very difficult because Social Security does deem a lot of the parents' income and resources to determining if they are eligible for that SSI benefit. Excuse me. With one thing I always recommend is, with Social Security, the definition of disability does change at the age of 18. So as early as your child's 18th birthday, they can reapply for Social Security benefits, and Social Security will no longer count any of the parents' income or resources as part of that application, just because they changed the definition of what they considered a child with a disability and an adult with a disability. So I think that would be the one kind of workaround with that is once they turn 18.
Let's see. What are some reimbursable work experiences? Internet, transportation, computer? Are those?
Yeah, for work expenses, I mean, with that, it can really be anything as long as you can relate it to the criteria. So one, it's paid for out of pocket by that beneficiary, so it can't be paid by a third party or a parent. It has to be paid by them. Two, it has to relate to the disability, so it has to help them in some way. And three, it also has to help them in their employment. So how it relates to disability and how it helps them to work. If you can answer those questions, really the sky's the limit of what an IRB can be.
Here's one. Is the special provision 1619B something that you have to request, or is it automatic once you begin making more money?
Great question. So specifically for 1619B, it is automatic. But no, of course, for this to apply, you really have to make sure you're reporting your wages to Social Security. So the only way they can make sure this applies is if they know that you have income. But yeah, 1619B specifically applies automatically. But with a lot of the other work incentives we talked about, whether it be an impairment-related work expense or that plan to achieve self-support, or any other work incentives out there, if you don't tell Social Security about it or apply for it, Social Security is not going to do it for you.
Okay, yeah, good to know. Okay, well, we're getting close to the end of our question and answer session, so let's take a couple more, and then we'll have to refer some of these to our to your resource page. Let's see. If an adult is seeking a job, does the person have to inform SSA? What is the process of informing SSA, and is Title II the same as SSDI?
Great question. So when reporting wages to Social Security, I always recommend that the first time you report in person at the Social Security office. Some important things that you need to do is one, inform Social Security. As soon as you know that you're going to start work, inform Social Security that, hey, I started work. Here is my employer's information. And then after that first month of work, applying or submitting all those wages to Social Security, typically in person. The reason why you want to do it in person is because Social Security needs to make an employer profile in your account. That usually typically you'll need the employer's identification number or that EIN number. And once you've done that and that employer profile is created, then you're able to use the other methods of reporting your wages to Social Security, whether that be using a My Social Security account online. Both SSI and Title II beneficiaries, so SSDI, CDB, can utilize a My Social Security account to report their wages online through their account. There's for SSI beneficiaries, there's also a automated phone line and a smartphone app that you can use to report your wages. And then there's also the more traditional ways of reporting where you can also do it by mail or by fax into Social Security. Now, no matter which way you choose to report your wages, highly, highly, highly recommend. I cannot, this is probably the most important part is when you report, keep copies for yourself and document everything that you've reported to Social Security. Now, Social Security isn't a perfect program. Things get lost, but if anything does happen, if you have those copies, that is the best thing that's going to be able to protect that beneficiary, is having those copies and being able to show that, hey, I did report my wages at this time. Why was this not input into the system? And when it comes to reporting for SSI and SSDI, they're typically the same. The only difference is SSI also is able to use that automated phone line and that wage reporting smartphone application.
Julian, you have given us so much wonderful information today. Thank you so much for staying a little extra and answering so many questions too. Really appreciate that. Thank you all for joining us today. That's the end of our conversation. And we're so grateful that you joined us this morning. And hopefully you got a lot of your questions answered too. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.